Russian forces have mounted a large attack on Zaporizhia in Ukraine, killing at least one and injuring 13 more. That's according to the city's mayor. The overnight rocket bombardment started several fires in the southeastern city that engulfed residential buildings. The mayor says 2 children were among those injured. The attack is the latest in Russia's unrelenting campaign against Ukraine in a war that's lasted more than 3 years now. And evidence is mounting that Russia's war effort is drawing military assistance from Chinese companies now. DW's Clifford Coonan took a closer look.
It was Russia's largest drone and missile attack since the war began. On September 7, Russia fired a total of 823 projectiles into Ukraine. According to numerous reports, many of the key components in Russia's drones come from Chinese suppliers, despite Western sanctions. While most Western nations have cut ties with Moscow since it invaded Ukraine in February 2022, China's relations with Russia have strengthened. This month, Xi Jinping welcomed Vladimir Putin to Beijing for a military parade to mark the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The Chinese president hailed the two leaders' closeness.
China-Russian relations have withstood the test of changing global circumstances, building a lasting friendship and comprehensive strategic cooperation, a model of win-win relations between major powers.
China buys nearly half of Russia's oil exports and sells it everything from cars to electronics. Ukraine's intelligence agency says Beijing supports Moscow from the sidelines by allowing Chinese firms to export goods with dual commercial and military purposes. It says China is providing gunpowder, specialised chemicals, machinery and components directly to at least 20 Russian defence plants. A recent investigation by the UK's Daily Telegraph identified 97 Chinese suppliers providing key components for the Russian drones deployed in Ukraine, including aircraft engines, microchips, metal alloys, camera lenses and carbon fibre yarns. Meanwhile, Reuters reports that Chinese-made engines are being covertly shipped via front companies to a state-owned drone manufacturer in Russia. Both the US and EU have repeatedly imposed sanctions on companies in third-party countries, including China, alleged to provide dual-use technology. China says it has strict controls and claims it's neutral in the war. But Ukraine intelligence says the Chinese-made components in drones discovered on the battlefield tell a different story.
I'm now joined by resident China analyst Clifford Coonan, who filed that report. Clifford, China and Russia had a very intense rivalry for many years. What has changed?
Well, this is one of the defining geopolitical relationships in the world, and it has been for hundreds of years in many ways, but particularly since 1949 when China was established and you had these two massive communist countries bordering each other. Mao Zedong went to China in 1949, went to Russia, in 1949 for his first foreign visit. He spent nearly 3 months there, and he formed this bond with Stalin. Then they fell out. It's been a long period. They share this huge border, 3,400 kilometers, and it's been back and forth for so long that whenever they do seem to be getting close again, something else happens. Right now, it seems, though, that they do seem to be very close again, and they seem to have found enough in common. And I think what they found in common is basically opposition to the West.
And what role did the war in Ukraine play in this coming back together again?
Well, it's difficult to assess that really, because I think China was a little bit, they knew it was coming. But for them, it's not really their area of interest. They were slightly concerned how it might affect relations with the US and how it might affect relations with Europe. But ultimately, it was Russia's issue. And China, I think, has been watching it closely to see what impact it could have in terms of how the West has reacted and things like that. So particularly when we look at this situation, like with Taiwan.
Now, you've mentioned that, for example, Mao Zedong and Stalin got along nice and then had a falling out. Putin and Xi have now met over 40 times. So how important is that relationship between the two men?
I think it's hard to know how much credence to give to the personal relationship, but certainly in between these two major superpowers, it's whether Russia, of course, is a superpower is another question now, but certainly diminished from what it once was. But it's still a nuclear power, and it's a massively important political entity. And I think the personal relationship has been something that has helped forged things like the BRICS organization, which is this configuration of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and a whole lot of South Africa and many other countries. I think a lot of that was driven by their relationship. I remember back when the BRICS started, there was a lot of, you could tell that there was a sort of a chemistry there. They share a lot of views about authoritarian government, about strongman politics, that kind of thing. So it certainly isn't a hindrance, but when these things, as is the way of geopolitics, if anything had to break it up, this won't mean much. But certainly, it's helped to grease the wheels in this situation.
Now let's come back to the current situation in Ukraine. How much is China learning from Russia's war in Ukraine? Also, you already mentioned Taiwan there.
Yeah, I think when Russia didn't overrun Ukraine as it hoped initially, I think it gave China pause in terms of they realized that plans to invade Taiwan or to do an economic blockade around Taiwan might be premature because it could turn into, it wasn't going to be as quick as maybe they'd hoped.
Isn't this a whole different ballgame in Taiwan?
Absolutely. But still, they wanted to see, first of all, how the military action would work, and then also to see the West's reaction. I mean, I think that's the key. Ultimately, the West, Europe particularly, and the US stepped up in a way that probably gave China pause in terms of its ambitions in Taiwan. On the other hand, Taiwan is a lot further away as far as they're concerned, and with the US looking inward, they're now looking at how the Trump administration is dealing with the war in Ukraine. They've seen what the Biden administration did. Now they're watching what the Trump administration is doing in Ukraine, and they're sort of seeing that there's less of an interest maybe in, while Trump has obviously been very involved, there's still a sense that he's a lot less committed to defending Ukraine than Biden.
Now, the vision of the three autocratic leaders, Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attending China's big military parade, that was a powerful image. What statement do you think these three countries were trying to make?
Well, I think what China is trying to do is, with Russia and with North Korea, is to present this sort of alliance. It's separate from the BRICS. It's another one of these power blocks that China really likes, and which shows that it is a player in the region, that it's a global player, and that it can stand up to the US, it can stand up to what it always calls Western hegemony, that it has a role to play, and that it ultimately could be it's going to be a major player in the world with these three authoritarian leaders. And then when you saw the bigger picture, they had all these other non-aligned nations, which is characterized often as being about the global south or whatever. But ultimately, this is about autocrats and authoritarian governments.
Power play, isn't it?
It's a power play.
Clifford Coonan, our China analyst. Thank you very much, Clifford.
Well, for more on this, let's bring in Claus Soong here. He is with the Mercator Institute for China Studies and focuses on China's global strategy. Thanks for being with us. Claus, what do you make of these reports that China is supplying components for Russia's war machine?
Yes, I think it's very clear we're seeing that China supplying these component, or especially dual-use good, to Russia's war machine. And I think from a more longer spectrum, we're seeing a surge after the invasion. Of course, go up and down, but in a general term, we are seeing the trend going up, especially after the invasion. So a surge in different kind of goods. So, for example, electric circuit, integrated circuit, like communication component, computing, telecommunication hardware, mechanical, optical, aerospace components, semiconductor, right? I think these are the things we are seeing that, especially from the Chinese sources of data, from the China custom, we're seeing that these are the export from China to Russia that actually will lead to the dual-use good to support Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
Okay, tell us how the relationship between China and Russia has evolved since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022.
No, actually, we are seeing that their relations strengthen much more, especially when we're seeing that there are more strategic partnership, comprehensive strategic partnership being built and reinforced. So we are seeing that both China and Russia is going to get more aligned. They are they have more strategic coordination in the international round. So we're seeing that in UN, in SCOs, in BRICS, right? So we can see Putin is given more spaces, more platform, even though with the international isolation. However, I think it's very important to take a look on like the nature of the bilateral relation, especially when we're seeing that China and Russia have different interests, but they do have a similar goal. So I would put it this way: they are a couple on the same bed with different dreams, and that have a different reflection about their strategic goal in different places. However, under the anti-America or anti-hegemonic narrative, they're sharing the same boat, and this will accommodate the different interests they have in different areas.
Now, North Korea dispatched 14,000 fighters along with equipment, munitions, and missiles to help Russia in its war against Ukraine. Can you see a scenario down the road, maybe, where China does the same?
I think that Beijing be very cautious for sending any troops and get involved in the battlefield in Ukraine. So no matter it is the force or like the peace broker in a sense, I think that is more cautious. We should be more cautious to see that. I do not expect that China was sending troops to Ukraine soon.
Now, China and Russia had an intense rivalry for years. Now they say they have a no-limits partnership. Is that really the case? How do you explain that?
So I think there is a limit, as we just mentioned, like they are same bed with different genes, right? They have more common goal in common that aim to build a so-called multipolar world order. However, there are limits within that. We're seeing that in the relation, it's not an equal relation. It's actually Russia needs China more than China needs Russia. And for Beijing, Russia is an indispensable partner, just geopolitically speaking, right? And also in the great power dynamic, China under the American containment that made Russia as a natural partner to stand with and get aligned with. But they are not allies. They are not allies. China is not Russia's ally. They don't have a common treaty to bind them together. So the relation is a little bit different in this sense, but they are surely aligned. It's why you see Putin accompany Xi Jinping in both SCO and in the parade last week.
Claus Soong with the Mercator Institute for China Studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.